My work focuses on the subtle balance that has come about between privacy and thirst for knowledge, between real news and fake news, with the recent evolution of the internet. The increase in popularity of social networks and the sale of newspapers at an all-time low are just two of the reasons why the perfect conditions were created to make Michel Foucault's theory on Panopticon a reality. But what does this term mean, and how does it influence our society today? The English philosopher and political reformer Jeremy Bentham conceived around the end of the 18th century a model prison in which a single guardian, located in a central tower, could control the prisoners in all cells, placed in a circle with a door in the inner part of the circle and a window to give light. The prisoners could not see each other, nor, thanks to an ingenious play of light and backlight, the guardian, who instead had a complete view of their lives inside the cells. Hence the name Panopticon, he who can see everything. The prisoners never knew if the guardian was watching them or not. In the early project, the guardian could also connect to the cells in audio, thanks to the metal tubes that allowed him to listen and to give orders. No special qualities were needed to be a guardian. Watching was enough. The panoptic vision is a differential asymmetrical vision. There is one that sees everything and everybody else sees nothing. And even if today's CCTV cameras make the shape of the prison irrelevant, it is still perfectly suited to exemplify social control. A technological application of Panopticon is the two-way television of 1984, the novel by George Orwell. The telescreen is on in all the houses, you can't turn it off, and it transmits and receives at the same time. Everything that happens in the house is transmitted by a cable to a police control center, and you never know if at a certain moment they are watching you or not. Subsequently, Bentham's project was taken up and brought back to life by Michel Foucault's book on prison institutions, Discipline and Punish, of 1975. Visibility, surveillance, and punishment are forms of modern power, in which each superior spies on his subordinates, and is in turn spied on and observed in institutions that tend to be increasingly totalizing, closed, disciplinary. The panopticon becomes a metaphor of modernity. To date, the discussions on panoptism are focusing more on the sociological sphere rather than on the purely theoretical one. Taking all the aspects of the panopticon into account, it was many times remarked that the evolution of the concepts of surveillance and privacy were followed by a process of spectacularization of the one, connected in turn to a mechanism of depersonalization of the subject who carries it out. In the modern age, all the institutions, from police to enterprises, from marketing operators to school and healthcare, carry out a continuous work of monitoring on daily behaviors, from food consumption to work, from ethical or religious choices to sexual preferences. In other words, our social life and individual life are put under control. At the same time, the meaning of privacy also shifts. Cameras allow for a constant control of human movements. Virtual platforms allow to reconstruct social activities of individuals, to put them in communication with each other. Interactive statistical modules allow a low-cost surveillance and a sociological reconstruction of taste, expectations, and trends. And then there are social networks. Just as the prisoners adapted and subjected themselves to the discipline to the point of making it a lifestyle and following it by automatism, it is the very microcells of the social organisms, so the people, that expose themselves voluntarily and autonomously to monitoring, to self-scheduling, making all information on their own activities, their own experiences, their own ideologies, their own expectations, and even their own emotions accessible. To understand how the undeniable possibilities offered by technology can be transformed into maladaptive phenomena, we should think about the relationship between individuals and knowledge in a hyper-connected world. The initial naive optimism that the introduction of new technologies without external constraints would have laid the foundations for the flourishing of a knowledge society is slowly coming to an end, in the face of the increasingly clear emerging of an ignorance society. In order not to fall into false hopes, it is necessary to consciously distinguish between the concept of knowledge and that of information. The Internet has given rise to an information society, often unverified and false information, as is well known, without bringing any increase in knowledge with it. The means of information technology allow us to come into contact with an outstanding amount of information, but often the latter, being completely devoid of reflective content, ends up giving rise to new forms of ignorance. The continuous and instantaneous succession of an exponential amount of data shows an extremely changing reality, difficult to access in terms of knowledge and out of our reach. The information available is way too much, as well as false, completely useless or superfluous, and in continuous evolution. Science, besides increasing human knowledge, also brings to the surface uncertainties, risks, and shadows. All these elements of lack of knowledge, traditionally considered sources of fears and anxieties, can represent instead primary resources for individuals, since decision-making processes often take place in the context of ignorance. It therefore seems necessary to rethink ignorance as a resource, based on the awareness that there is an irreducible dimension of not knowing. In this sense, the solution to many problems may not depend on a form of knowledge, but on legitimate, rational, and justified ignorance. Faced with some issues on which we have incomplete knowledge, it seems more convenient to act on the basis of what we do not know, rather than on the basis of what we do know. In conclusion, the network architecture is encouraging the effective involvement of users in social media and reinforcing a mutual sharing practice. Both the structure and the attitude of the users create a situation that can be defined as panoptic in design. Social connections, comments, opinions, and preferences expressed through likes or retweets are being shaped into visible, measurable, searchable, and correlated content. This voluntary exposition and engagement with others is considered as the tool for practice of participatory or interpersonal surveillance. By being deprived of privacy information, for example the ability to control information about them, users may be afraid of discrimination and prejudice, which can lead to self-censorship and self-suppression, as well as a reduced ability to decide for themselves, to choose to maintain a variety of identities and social roles. Surveillance is permanent in its effects, even if it is discontinuous in its action.